I never knew this connection here to the Chicago area.
I always thought that was so fascinating.
Do they throw ragers at that house to this day?
We've got these ties to this American classic, and we want to honor it forever.
We've got a claim to what might be the most famous movie of all time. Chicago has been a regular stop for Hollywood directors for decades. Films and TV shows, they love to show the skyline, the city, the people, and the culture here in Chicago. And it feels like in the last few years, the city has had more of a moment with Shameless, The Bear, and the Chicago shows on NBC. And so we wanted to dive in a little deeper and look at that longtime Hollywood and Chicago connection. And we have the only in Chicago expert back with us again, Lexi Sutter. Welcome back to The Takeaway. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Alex. Great to be here.
You've spent a long time reporting on all these connections, and not only the big ones that everybody knows, Ferris, Bueller's Day Off, The Fugitive, Blues Brothers, everybody knows and loves those, which is great. But some of the lesser known things that maybe you didn't know pulled in some connection to Chicago, even if the movie wasn't entirely shot here or about Chicago. So what are some of the movies or connections that people may not realize have a local tie?
Well, recently I did a story about the iconic novel, The Great Gatsby.
Okay.
And the setting, if you remember the movies or the book,
I'm thinking East Coast.
Right, East Coast, New Yorkers, Long Island, this very lavish existence. Well, it's actually the characters in the movie book are based off Lake Foresters, which people who live in Lake Forest, Illinois, North Shore, also had connections to living downtown at one time. You're talking about the Roaring 20s, a very glamorous era, huge parties. It's when Lake Forest was really just country estates.
Yeah.
You didn't necessarily live there and commute downtown like you do now. So I always thought that was so fascinating because, again, you assume New York.
Yeah. Well, especially because the one time I'll say I read it or skimmed it, sorry, in high school, whatever I might have done, because everybody reads that book when they're younger. I think I remember there being a mention of Lake Forest maybe once or twice in the book, but then also I think Paris is mentioned or, France. But yes, you think about it as a long out. So what did The Great Gatsby, yes, originally a book, and then they made it into a movie. What did that draw on here? And what is still here to kind of recognize that history?
So the home where F. Scott Fitzgerald, the author of the book, really had the setting of lavish parties, still exists in Lake Forest and is actually owned by someone new today. In fact, when we were out there shooting video for our story, the homeowner came outside. What are you doing here?
Oh my gosh.
You're not in trouble. We're doing a story about The Great Gatsby. She's like, I get it.
Yeah.
We know what we bought. We bought a home that has great history, and that's one of the reasons why we love it.
So they see a news van and they freak out.
They see a news van,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Exactly. So the one thing I loved, though, was F. Scott Fitzgerald. It was his personal experience. He was from Minnesota, went to an Ivy League school out east, would take the train, got off in Lake Forest with some friends, actually met the first person he fell in love with, based Daisy Buchanan, the leading lady in The Great Gatsby, off that woman. Ginevra King was her name, and she grew up in Lake Forest, and that was her home where the beautiful lavish parties took place.
So when you're watching the movie and it's Leo on the water,
right?
There's the name of the house. I can't remember the house, that name in the movie, but should be a Lake Forest house. Correct. If it had been set here.
Correct. Yeah. So he really based it off a lot of his own experiences, and people know this. And there's actually a beautiful display in Lake Forest at the History Center right now that you can check out yourself. But people know this because F. Scott Fitzgerald kept impeccable records of his life. He had essentially a diary. And so they were able to piece together what he wrote about in the novel that in some ways was fiction, right?
Yeah.
But really was drawn off his own personal experiences too.
So the people who bought that house, did they buy it because of that, or they just knew that?
I asked, of course, when she came running out, I was like, wait, do you live here because of The Great Gatsby? She said, no, my husband has ties to Lake Forest, but we knew what we bought. And in some ways it does attract attention. She said people will drive by because a simple Google search, you can find the home.
And I got to know, do they throw ragers at that house to this day? Is that still?
I should have asked that follow-up question. I forgot that one. I do know they had a celebration in June to really kick off the History Center locally and their exhibit. And the homeowners hosted people And I'm sure it was a nice nod to that time frame of life in the 20s when they had these huge summer parties, and it was very lavish, and there was so much opulence and glamour that came with that time frame.
That's so cool. And another one that I see here, Back to the Future. So not shot in Chicago, really about Chicago. So I've seen Back to the Future a number of times.
Yep.
I never knew this connection here to the Chicago area.
This was a really fun one that I was able to discover, if you will. And that is that Allstate Insurance is headquartered in the Northbrook area. 10 years before Back to the Future was made. So we're talking the mid-1970s. Allstate was actually tasked with creating a prototype with DeLorean, John Z. DeLorean, who we know the DeLorean in the movie is a time machine. Right. They partnered to show Congress that you can have essentially a cool, smaller car, and it can still be safe. It can have seatbelts, it can have airbags. So they made a prototype of this DeLorean to present to Congress. 10 years later, that design is tapped to be the main legendary vehicle time machine in this, pop icon of a movie, Back to the Future.
What is it about? I mean, yes, it's a strange looking car and nothing looked like it. Is it just the design that caught Hollywood's eye and then it was,
so it was really a partnership with DeLorean.
Okay.
So whatever connections DeLorean had then with Hollywood to really get it on screen. But I think it's so fascinating that we're talking about something that doesn't exist, right? A time machine. But ultimately.
And DeLoreans that barely still exist. Cars.
Correct. Yeah. But its inception was all about safety. And in fact, was designed by an insurance company. So here you are with this vehicle that would be anything but safe, right? We're talking about some fictional time machine.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny that, exactly. It's kind of funny the dichotomy we have there. One fun fact that I learned while I was on that shoot for the Only in Chicago story was because they were filming and, they're using special effects and things that are way different then than they are even today.
Yeah.
The dog, Einstein. Yeah. Everyone knows the dog behind the wheel of the DeLorean. That was a man in a dog costume that was made to look like a dog.
Oh my gosh.
Because they can't have a guy, doing circles or skidding across the parking lot. They can't have a dog behind the wheel. No insurance company is going to insure the movie set. Right. I thought that was such a fun little fact because I always remember watching it and being like, the dog's driving, That's not the case.
Oh, wow. Okay. So and it's funny that Congress would partner with this insurance I guess I know cars were bigger gas guzzlers back then, and
well, think about how futuristic it is.
Yeah,
it really was ahead of its time. The Doors,
yeah,
there was so much about it that really made it so fascinating. But it seems like a perfect fit for a movie like Back to the Future, not so much a presentation to lawmakers in Washington, D.C.
I just never knew of that local tie. That's so cool. And then there's so many spots around Chicago in so many movies that have people, I mentioned The Fugitive earlier. That might be, I don't know if I can pick a favorite Chicago movie, but
it's hard.
It's hard. That's one of them. But there's so many great shots and the L is involved in the plot and all that stuff. But talk about some of the spots that you found along the way in reporting that really stand out for Hollywood in showing Chicago in this great light.
Besides, we talk about the skyline, right? And when you see shots of the river, and even in older movies, you see how the skyline is transformed.
Big time.
Basis today. I think those shots are so iconic. But for me, I think it's Union Station. There are so many movies that were shot at Union Station. There is The Untouchables, which is a gangster thriller where there's this huge shootout on the steps. And those steps, that's where you still walk in to go down to Amtrak today. A personal favorite of mine, a rom-com, My Best Friend's Wedding. She's chasing the bride. Oh my God.
Sorry. Yeah.
Add it to your to-do list. But she's running through Union Station trying to find the bride. So it shows that it can really be a place for movies that can be any type of film. Gary Coleman on the right track at Union Station. There was a Tommy Lee Jones movie filmed in there. Those benches, for anyone that has gone through Union Station, those have literally been there since the early inception of Union Station, like the 20s, 30s. So it's timeless. It doesn't change. But you see movies throughout the years filmed there. And I think that's such a Chicago mainstay.
And they just don't build buildings like that anymore.
They don't.
It's a special place.
Yeah.
And Ferris Bueller, I think everybody who's seen the movie, and it's in that pantheon of Chicago movies for sure, maybe has a favorite spot that they can pick out, whether it's the Wrigley Field scene or, the Cameron's house on the North Shore.
Yeah.
But looking at some of the ways that Hollywood turned things that aren't supposed to be what they are into like a restaurant or something like that.
Totally.
It's amazing what they did there too.
Right. I think one thing that I learned really digging into Ferris Bueller, which we've all seen a million times, and it seems like you know every single street corner where they filmed. I did not know. You know, the fancy French restaurant where he goes in and he pretends to be
Abe Froman,
the Sausage King of Chicago.
Yes.
We love that scene. That restaurant is a home in the Gold Coast neighborhood.
Okay.
Corner of Dearborn and Schiller. And if you go now, you can kind of tell the exterior is the same, but they had it covered in ivy in the movie. Oh. They filmed the interior scenes, so really the look of the restaurant in Los Angeles. Oh. But the exterior shots where they pull the car up and then, you know, he sees his dad or he just misses his dad as he's leaving the restaurant. Those are all right there in Gold Coast. So that was a really cool one because now I walk by and I'm like, didn't know that one.
The Chez Quy.
Right there. The Chez Quy. Yeah, exactly.
And then another iconic Chicago building, not downtown.
Yeah.
The South Shore Cultural Center.
Yes.
Used to be South Shore Country Club. There's a few movies that have used that as a scene as well.
Similar to Ferris Bueller, Blues Brothers come rolling in hot, right? You know that.
I mean, and that all the neighborhood shots in that
right
as well, not just downtown.
Right. But the South Shore Cultural Center was really a hub for Blues Brothers. You know, you see the cop kind of leaning on the pillar, snoozing. They go sneaking into the theater. Well, those interior scenes also shot in Hollywood, but the exterior, that iconic, beautiful drive-in at the South Shore Cultural Center, we see that in the Blues Brothers. Also, A League of Their Own filmed their charmed school scene. You know, when it's like, learn to be a lady, cross your legs.
Yeah, because you think Wrigley Field all the way.
Right.
Yeah.
They balance like a dish on their head or something. They're learning to be ladies. That was filmed also inside the South Shore Cultural Center. They've got a beautiful room, the solarium, where you look out at Lake Michigan. So when you're in there, you're like, wait, like deja vu.
Yeah.
But I had no idea that was right there at that same place that you think about the Blues Brothers. So there are a lot of those locations in the city that kind of offer a dual purpose, if you will.
Yeah. And so it's great to see that the traditions that we're talking about, a lot of these movies are decades old or years old.
Totally.
Have now held up more with television, I think, in terms of frequency over movies. The Bear, just the scene shots over and over again. Different place setters are just amazing. And of course, the Chicago shows here, I mean, filling all over the city. I've even been fooled a couple of times saying, oh my gosh, what's happening over there? There's like an explosion or a lot of...
Is there an accident?
Yeah, right. And then you see how realistic they try to make it with all the emergency personnel. And I think a lot of people have seen that too.
Yeah.
What kind of impact has that had? And where have they focused on any certain places to shoot over and over again when they are out in the city?
So the One Chicago series has had a huge impact on the city. I think giving a lot of people love it, whether you live in Chicago or not. So they get really a taste of kind of that grit of Chicago. There are several locations, Lottie's Pub in Bucktown, which is really a neighborhood staple, hangout, kind of a dive bar, if you will, but is very popular on the shows. The University of Illinois at Chicago, their actual working police station doubles as the headquarters for Chicago PD. So though it's a working police station, and when we were there shooting video, we see officers coming in and out, that's also where they film a lot of their Chicago PD scenes. So they are tapping into locations that are still being used present day, just like Lottie's is a bar that people go to all the time. It's also where they film a lot of scenes for Chicago Fire. And the impact, I think, goes beyond just the notoriety. A lot of jobs from shows like that in Chicago. A lot of people are employed and have this Hollywood type of gig that you can now do in Chicago because there's so much filming happening here.
I think that's like the best of the situation, right? Because you don't have to live in New York or LA where it's so expensive.
Right.
And more competitive.
Yeah, exactly.
You have an opportunity to do that kind of work here. Where does Chicago sit in this industry? Because you read more and more, they're shooting a lot in Georgia because they have amazing credits down in Georgia.
Yep.
Vancouver's kind of become a hotspot as well. So where does Chicago fit in the Hollywood landscape?
So Chicago, ironically, similar to city size, New York, LA, Chicago, LA is number 1, New York is number 2, Chicago's number 3.
For production.
Production and filming. Part of that, I think, is because we have so much to offer. Mm-hmm. People love our food scene. They love the culture. We do have this different Midwestern feel than New York or LA, than either coast that I think you can only get here. It's hard to replicate our skyline, the river, the lake.
Yeah.
So that's one reason. Our government is also really working on luring more of that business here, offering tax credits. You mentioned that happening in the South. So in the last couple of years, we've done a lot in business with films, and the goal is to keep growing it. And right now, it feels like it really is growing, especially when you mention shows like The Bear.
Gotcha. So I have homework now. Is it Runaway Bride? You said is the
My Best Friend's Wedding.
Oh, My Best Friend's Wedding. Sorry.
Another Julia Roberts classic.
Okay. Sorry, I get him confused. But then I gave you homework a second ago. You have to watch Backdraft.
Yes, absolutely. I'm looking forward to that.
Great real Chicago movie. Love that. Going way back in time, I knew about Oz Park and some connections to the Wizard of Oz in Chicago, but I actually didn't know how far back this went. So what is the genesis of this and how does it affect Chicago?
1800s, the author of The Wizard of Oz, the book, before it ever became a movie that we all love, he lived in Humboldt Park. And there's actually a yellow brick road outside the home where he wrote the book and where he used to live. But then Oz Park was created as a nod to our roots to the Wizard of Oz. And the figurines in Oz Park, Dorothy, the Tin Man, the Lion, are actually based off the characters. Like they used those molds of those.
They look good. They did a nice job.
Yeah. So, and that was really a community initiative to say, hey, we've got these ties to this American classic and we want to honor it forever. So residents in Lincoln Park really pulled that together. And I know that became very popular again with Wicked launching last year, the movie. And, you know, part 2 of Wicked is coming again. And so there's been a lot of eyes on the Wizard of Oz and its inception. And I think it's very cool to have, the author ties that people think maybe Kansas, right? Because that's where the film takes place. But certainly it was in Chicago where that started.
We've got a claim to what might be the most famous movie of all time.
True.
I mean, it's up there.
Yeah, definitely. That transcends generations.
Yeah, for sure. And then every time I watch Batman: The Dark Knight, that's another recent movie where there are scenes all over Chicago, LaSalle Street at night, and Lower Wacker, that famous scene with the garbage truck. And that's another one that I think got a lot more people like, oh, Chicago can play a good Gotham. You know, it can basically turn into anything.
Totally. I think when you see those pictures on Instagram or videos, you know, when it is dark and the bridges are up or something, everyone's like, oh, Gotham City. You know, like we kind of double as Gotham City, especially when you go into Lower Wacker. Talk about a good use of Lower Wacker, right? I mean, great for driving and if you want to lose your GPS signal, but it's also makes for great visuals and almost kind of this spooky, eerie feeling that I think you get in a thriller like The Dark Knight.
Yeah, that's such a great scene. And we can't talk about Chicago movies or Chicago area movies without talking about Home Alone, because it's just a hit every single year.
Every holiday.
The house that's in Winnetka and all the tourism that comes by of people wanting to see that house, which is still much as it was when they made that movie.
Totally.
That may be, you know, outside of the city, probably the most iconic site, I would think. Maybe other than Cameron's house and Ferris Bueller, but the whole movie's about the house.
Yeah, I don't think people stalk Cameron's house from Ferris Bueller.
No, you're right.
But people certainly do stalk the home in Winnetka. In fact, I actually just made contact with the former homeowner who owned it when they were filming that movie. I think they gave him like $50,000 for it. And he had no idea the impact it would have. So much so later on after it came out, he was sitting in the living room with his family and people were peering in his windows. And he's like, oh no, what are we? And now if you drive by, there's a big fence, right? I don't know if anybody even lives there right at this moment. It's gone through different sales over the years, but we are going to sit down with him for an Only in Chicago and talk about that experience, because I think, you know, maybe they thought this will be cool. This will be a cool family memory. And it really, that movie and that home is truly iconic.
It's pretty much a character. I mean, it's not just a place in which to shoot the movie. It is central to the core of the plot. I mean, 100% about that.
And it looks so similar. I don't know about the inside, but the exterior, you know, if you drive down that street in Winnetka, you're like, that's it. That's the Home Alone movie. Yeah. And I think it's fun for people to see what they see on the screen and then see it in real life.
And then it hasn't changed that much.
Hasn't changed,
either.
Yeah.
So I know this is a really hard question to answer for everybody out there. Certainly for me and probably for you. Do you have a favorite Chicago movie?
That is a really hard one, because I think there's parts of so many Chicago movies. I'm biased towards Chicago movies. I love them all. I love to see the city we love and we're so proud of. I think I got to go with Ferris Bueller's Day Off. There's so many scenes from Wrigley. I do love, my favorite scene is the parade scene when he's on the float and they're just jamming in the loop. Sometimes, fun fact about me, sometimes when I get on the bus, I'm heading down Michigan Avenue to work, I'll just listen to the song, you know, like parade scene in my mind, get hyped
Twist and shout.
Twist and shout?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm going to go with Blues Brothers, which is as much of a cop-out, no pun intended, much of a cop-out as Ferris Bueller's Day Off. But just there are so many great shots, and it's such a Chicago movie, you know, when he tells him 1060 West Addison. Yeah, it's Wrigley Field. You know, just so many little Chicago jokes even in there. So that's going to be mine. Sorry, it was kind of an obvious answer.
Same
here.
I
had to do it. So digging into this Hollywood-Chicago connection, what is your takeaway from doing all this research and finding out all these cool facts, including some of these little ones that people may not have known?
I think people don't give the city enough credit. I think we show up in so many spaces on screen, so many different avenues, right? It could, like we've talked about, thrillers, rom-coms, just a classic comedy. I think that Chicago really has a place in Hollywood and maybe even gives Hollywood a run for its money. And I think we will continue to do so as long as we keep making it a priority.
I really hope so. And then we'll have to see an update to this Only in Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks for coming by, Lexi. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Alex.
Lexi gave us a lot of great history in that conversation, and Chicago undoubtedly has an amazing past with connections to Hollywood. My takeaway, though, is a little bit of concern about the future. Of course, the entertainment business is changing so fast, but where movies and TV shows get made is also rapidly evolving. Yeah, you know, New York and LA are going to always have a spot in it, but with the rise of Atlanta, Vancouver, and a lot of other places, and on top of the fact that with computer-generated imagery and AI, you can make anywhere almost look like anywhere else. I'm worried that Chicago is going to hold on to its spot as a destination to shoot. Hopefully, we're able to lean on a lot of the talent that we have here, both in front of and behind the camera, and everything else that brings people to Chicago to keep that up. I'm just hopeful that what makes Chicago special in the eyes of Hollywood doesn't go away. That's my takeaway. I want to hear your takeaway and your favorite Chicago movie. Leave them in the comments.